Before we get started with this week's episode, I want to take a moment to thank this week's newest Patreon supporter, James Griffith. Thank you for your support. To become a contributor to the Seattle Files, go to patreon.com/The Seattle Files. Your support makes this show possible.
Now that I'm used to the climate, I think that if man ever found a place to live easy and happy, that Eden is on Puget Sound. Eden is on Puget Sound. That Eden is on Puget Sound. A place to live easy and happy. That Eden is on Puget Sound.
Hello, you are listening to the Seattle Files. My name is Chris Allen, I'm your host. On each episode of the show, I get together with a different local comedian, and together we discuss the strange, unusual, interesting, and oftentimes lesser-known aspects of our local history. Joining me today on the program is Greg Stackhouse. How's it going, Greg?
It's going good, Chris.
Excellent. Thanks so much for being here. Greg is an ensemble member in Unexpected Productions down at the Market Theater. He's been performing there for, 70 years?
71.
71 years,
71
yeah.
This November.
Very, very long time. He does a lot of long-form shows there. You can see him perform there many nights during the week. He is also the recent adopter of 2 small kittens, which I love about him. So how are the cats doing these days?
Cats are good. It was I adopted 2 female kittens and then went to the vet and I got a male and a female kitten. So
the
vet does
little change-o?
Little
Is that, or you learned something new about the kitten?
He always knew he was a boy, but I didn't know until the vet visit.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's hard to tell sometimes.
I was not aware of that. There's a lot. I don't have cats. There's a lot I don't know. How long have you lived in the Northwest, in the Seattle area?
I was born in Federal Way, Washington, and my parents still own the house that that they bought when I was born. So
okay.
They bought it in November. I was born in January. So
okay, of this year?
This year,
no, yeah, okay.
A long time ago. So yeah, I've lived in the Northwest my entire life.
Cool. How much do you know about local history?
I would like to say I know a lot about local history, but listening to your show over the weeks and months and years, I don't know as much as I thought I did.
Okay. Well, we worked on projects together before, and I know that you do know a fair amount about local, more than the average, I would say.
I don't know.
Okay.
Fair enough.
All right.
I will trust your assessment, though.
Excellent. And you don't know what we're going to be talking about today, right?
No clue.
Okay, so normally I don't tell people ahead of time what it is we're going to be talking about, and it's kind of revealed over the course of the story. But today it's going to be a little bit different, because as you mentioned, you're from Federal Way. I am also from Federal Way, as you know. Mm-hmm. And we're going to be talking about the history of Federal Way.
Okay.
The history of Federal Way, Washington.
You know what's funny? I probably don't even know this.
No one does. I didn't know.
No, and that's not something they teach. So.
No, because you know what happened in Federal Way? Almost nothing, as we'll find out over the course of the episode.
I'm aware.
And just a quick heads up to listeners, if this is your first episode of the Seattle Files, maybe check out a different one, unless you're from Federal Way and want to dive down this rabbit hole with us, because this is going to be very inside baseball.
You're about to get a lot more listeners from Federal Way.
I think so. Yeah. I believe so. I hope so. I've been trying to crack into that Federal Way demographic.
It's a huge market.
But if you're not familiar with Federal Way, maybe check out one of the episodes about cults. Those are fun. But anyway, we'll go ahead and get started. We're going to be talking about the history of Federal Way.
Fantastic. This
Wonderful.
is going to be news for both of us.
Yes.
Or at least me.
The first people arrived in the Pacific Northwest around 12,000 years ago, the Coast Salish tribes. There's recent accounts to suggest that it's possible they arrived even earlier than that. It's really hard to tell because there's no written history, and they're going off found artifacts. The Muckleshoot tribe inhabited the Auburn Valley to the east of Federal Way, but they were not Native American settlements in Federal Way. There were no rivers that could be navigated by canoe, and the forest was incredibly dense.
This is true from when I was a kid.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Remnants of native camps have been found at Poverty Bay, where it is believed they camped from time to time when passing through.
Okay.
Poverty Bay is down there by Redondo.
Yes.
Yep.
I'm familiar with that.
Yes. The first non-natives to come to the Puget Sound were George Vancouver and his men on the HMS Discovery in 1792. What is now Washington State officially became a part of the U.S. in 1846 when the Oregon Treaty was signed, and Washington became its own territory in 1853. Before that, it was part of the Oregon Territory. Mm-hmm. So this is slowly becoming a part of the U.S. The first road built through present-day Federal Way was constructed in 1860.
1860.
Mm-hmm. Any guesses on what road that was?
I'm going to say Pacific Highway.
Oh, you're. What's the other main road through Federal Way?
Military Road.
Military Road, yes.
I should know this because my parents' house is on Military Road.
You live on, or you grew up on
Military Road.
the first road through Federal Way.
That's insane.
Yeah. 1860 was when it was built. Military Road was cleared to transport supplies between Fort Steilacoom and Fort Lawton. Fort Lawton is up by Discovery Park there. A telegraph wire was added along that road in 1864.
Okay.
The first white people who came to what is now Federal Way stayed for a short time but didn't settle. The first was Zacharias Stone, who came to Poverty Bay with his family in 1869.
No one really stays in Federal Way.
No, they don't, unless you fuck up.
That's true.
So apparently he didn't fuck up, and he
is like, I gotta get out of here.
He went there and he was like, "Oh, the Indians knew this place was shitty,
Yeah.
so I guess I am going to
Time
leave
to
as
move
well."
on.
Yeah. Well, Zacharias Stone, great 1869 name. The first known permanent settler was Ernst Ferdinand Lang, who built a small cabin, but the first real homesteader set up on Poverty Bay was in 1871. And the homesteader was named Sam Stone. And he named the previously unnamed area Stone's Landing.
I'd never heard that.
Neither did I, yeah.
Yeah.
Stone's Landing, though, great name for a town.
Yeah.
You know what's better than?
Federal Way.
Federal Way, yes. By the late 1880s, there were 50 homesteaders in the Federal Way area. Stone and other loggers set up a small sawmill and floated logs out to be transported to larger mills in Tacoma and Seattle. So it's a very small mills process, but the main
for
mills.
that, it seems like it's a pretty good location. If you're going to be like shipping things to Seattle and Tacoma, Federal Way is kind of where you want to be.
Pretty much, which is kind of why it's the suburb now, because
Yeah.
it's a relatively close distance. But yeah.
It's close to SeaTac, which of course is abbreviated.
Yeah.
Maybe the second worst name.
SeaTac?
SeaTac, yeah.
I think Federal Way is a worse name than SeaTac. Remember there was a petition a while ago to rename it to Evergreen?
To
Did you hear about
Federal Way or
Yeah,
SeaTac?
rename Federal Way.
I
Evergreen.
remember hearing something about calling it Poverty Bay, like maybe 20 years ago.
Yeah, that's not a bad name either.
No,
it's not great, but
better than Federal Way.
better than Federal Way, yeah. Stone's Landing did well, cutting down massive 500-year-old trees, and since there was a large stretch of beach with calm waters, by the 1880s it started to become known as a wonderful recreation area. The land is comprised of glacial till, with massive rocks that make farming difficult, and as a result, little farming was done in the area.
It also makes slip and slides incredibly a bad decision.
Are you talking about wild waves? Or?
I'm talking about the little slip and slides you put in your front yard. We could not own those because it just hurt.
Oh my god, yeah.
Like you ran a hose down the yellow slip and slide and you like ran and jumped, but we had one for about 5 minutes and we all just ended up crying.
Yeah, but they're not like well manicured like lawns. It's all just rocky and stony.
The rocks will be pushed up.
Yeah. My parents were like, "We'll get a blue tarp and we'll put a little bit of Dawn detergent on it, and it's the same."
It kind of is. I mean, it's
kind of, yeah.
Still rocky.
That was that was Federal Way. It was also when it snowed and all the kids went down sleds and hills. My parents were like, "Just sit on a garbage bag. It's the same thing." It's not the same thing.
It's not the same thing.
One is a slide. One doesn't work at all.
We had very similar parents.
I believe so. Yeah, sounds like it.
Yeah.
A large pier was built, and steamships carrying people up and down Puget Sound would dock twice a day down at Poverty Bay. Logging camps started popping up in the surrounding area, and there were camps on Steel Lake, what is now South 262nd and Pacific Highway, Peasley Canyon, and Dash Point State Park.
I am familiar with all of those places.
Oh yeah, all the hot spots.
All the hot spots.
In F-dub. Mm-hmm. The first schools were built in the 1880s. A small log cabin school appeared near Mirror Lake called the French Lake School. You know where Mirror Lake is?
Oh, yeah.
Down on 312, across from that Catholic church? Yeah.
Yep.
Mirror Lake was called French Lake at the time. It was named after Philip French, who was an early settler, and 312 was called Philip French Road.
I like that better.
I like that better, too.
Yeah.
I used to live just down at the end of Philip French Road growing up. And then I was at the
So
end.
you were the heart of Federal Way.
I was at the heart of Federal
I was
Way.
kind of out there by 5 Mile Lake and
Okay.
kind of even suburban Federal Way.
I definitely lived. I lived down by Adelaide and Lakota.
Oh, yeah.
You know, down there where there's that grocery store that could not stay in business because it was Johnny's, and then somebody got killed behind Johnny's, and people stopped going there, and then they opened a QFC, and then that shut down, and they opened a market, and that shut down, and now it's just abandoned again.
Because people just got to Kentucky Fried Chicken in Federal Way. No
Damn.
one actually buys their own groceries.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
I also heard a rumor. I did some research and I was not able to look it up. That little commercial park down there was the site of the first ever drive-through Starbucks. But I was never able to find. I went to the Starbucks website. I dug into it a little bit, and I was not able to find confirmation. And it might have just been
The one on 320th?
on 312th,
312.
down at the very end of 312th, down by Lakota.
Yeah, I don't even know about that. I worked at Starbucks for many years, and I don't remember when the first drive-through came to be.
It was in the early 1990s. The Starbucks website talks about when the first drive-through Starbucks opened, but it wasn't. They didn't say which one, where it opened.
That does make sense for Federal Way, though, because
Be the
people
experiment. Yeah.
like, don't get out of your car.
Yeah.
Federal Way.
It's dangerous.
Yeah, exactly.
In 1887, the Adelaide Beach School opened, and it was replaced a few years later by the Buena School, which was larger. And these schools existed near where Adelaide Elementary still operates today.
Yep, I remember Adelaide Elementary very well.
I went there.
You went there.
I went to Adelaide Elementary, yes.
We played a lot of baseball games at all those schools.
Oh, yeah, I'll bet.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had a pretty big field down there. Yeah. A handful of school districts were formed in the area, but each district only had one school and served about 25 to 50 students. Just small schools, but each school had its own district. There wasn't a centralized district system. In 1892, Henry Bruce and L.F. Rogers bought 180 acres of land south of what is now Redondo and planned on developing the town of Buena. But the panic of 1893 stopped their plans. So the stock market crashed in 1893, and they were not able to develop this new city.
Buena's a better name.
Buena's a much better name than Federal Way, yeah. Yeah, it's amazing how that
we
name...
we could have lived in such a better place.
Of anything!
Like,
anything at all,
I grew up in Buena. Like, that sounds so awesome compared to, like, Federal Way.
Federal Way. I remember as a kid going to other places, and they were like, where are you from? And I would say Federal Way, and they were like, oh, not your street. What city are you from?
Yeah.
And I would say, oh, fuck you, person
Yes.
from somewhere else.
We go to Tacoma for fun.
Yeah. That's where the Fun Flex was.
Well, they had a Tower Records in Tacoma.
They did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was like a 15-mile drive to Tower Records.
And the tide flats down there. Good fun for going down and driving around, getting into trouble. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So in 1900, the Weyerhaeuser Company purchased 900,000 acres of land in western Washington. They never logged in Federal Way, though. But it was headquartered in Federal Way until 2016, when the campus was sold for $70.5 million to a Los Angeles-based industrial realty group.
I'd heard that, and it was a sad day.
It was a sad day.
Yeah. That's a really cool building.
It's
kind of tucked away in the woods there.
Yeah, they have that whole kind of manicured campus with a bunch of trails and
It's got ivy along the windows. You can see it from the freeway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. If you're ever driving south and you just pass the 320th Street exit and you go look to the left, there's a big building there. That's the Weyerhaeuser campus.
Yep.
These are the kind of things you don't know unless you grew up in Federal.
I love that campus. That
It's
was like one of the cool
gorgeous.
things about Federal Way. That was nestled in the woods there, and it's
Yep.
kind of like I want to work there someday.
My grandfather worked for Weyerhaeuser for many years.
If you lived in Federal Way, you knew someone who worked at Warehouse.
Yeah, he got, when he retired, they gave him a little pine cone encased in solid glass.
Nice.
That was his retirement thing.
It's kind of cool.
Yeah, it was neat. Yeah. It was really cool. Weyerhaeuser is now headquartered in Pioneer Square.
I did not
They
know that.
happened very recently. They just bought a big chunk of land there right on Occidental Park. So, you know where the Comedy Underground is?
Yes.
Right across the park from the Comedy Underground and the Grand Central building there. They just built a brand new giant black box boring looking building, and that's Weyerhaeuser headquarters now.
I think they reduced their staff by quite a bit in the last 10 or so years, maybe even longer.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
In 1904, Charles Betts opened the first store in the area. It had a shop on the first floor and rented rooms on the second. In 1906, disaster struck. The settlement was small, but one summer day there were about 2,000 people in town, many out on the pier waiting for steamships, and the pier was unable to support the weight of so many and collapsed, killing 13 people.
I did not know that.
Stone's Landing, yeah. Big disaster in Stone's Landing.
That's terrible.
Yeah. Charles Betts was worried the pier collapse disaster would ruin the reputation of the small town, so he decided to change the name, and he changed it to Redondo.
Still a better name.
Still a better name, since he was hoping the town would become a destination spot for waterfront recreation like Redondo Beach, California. So he wanted to make it like a waterfront vacation town, and so he named it Redondo. Makes sense. Betts grew the small waterfront community into the recreational destination he hoped for. He constructed carnival rides, including a Ferris wheel and carousel. In 1922, he and his son Weston built an amuse-drome that housed a bowling alley and a dance hall. Just a big building.
What year was this?
This was in 1922.
Okay, so
yeah,
it was gone.
It burned down in 1951.
Darn it.
It turned into a roller rink, but then it burned down, and the whole waterfront vacation destination summer spot kind of died.
We could have had it all, Chris.
We could have had it all.
Could have
really.
Been bowling alley, amusement park area down there.
Oh, that would have been really cool.
Changed our childhoods.
Yeah. Until we got the bowling alley on Pack Highway there, up by 272nd. I went to
Sports Center. Was it called something like Sports World or something like that?
Yeah, I think it was Sports World.
Sports World.
Yeah. I went to a wedding there at the bowling alley.
Classy.
Once. Yeah, it's Federal Way.
There was a video arcade though that was in the dark.
Oh, it was great.
That was
yeah,
a pretty cool video arcade.
That's true. It was kind of sunken down into it. I remember going there. Yeah, that was fun.
Not as cool as the gold mine, but
the gold mine.
Am I getting ahead of you?
Where was the gold mine?
The gold mine was in the mall. This was when the SeaTac Mall first opened. There was a video arcade called the Gold Mine, and all other video arcades pale in comparison.
Okay, I remember Tilt in the mall. I remember going to Tilt all the time, but I don't remember the gold mine.
It was after the gold mine closed.
Okay, interesting.
But it could have been on the waterfront.
Could have been on the waterfront. Yeah, could have had this big waterfront recreation destination spot where you would go to Federal Way instead of through Federal Way. In 1910, plans started to build a massive highway to run along the west coast and connect Canada to Mexico. The road would be called US 99. The dirt road, what would become 99, was built through the Federal Way area in 1915. And Pacific Highway South was completed through Federal Way in 1930. And most roads in Federal Way wouldn't be paved until the 1940s.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, Highway 99 was paved in 1930. In 1911, there were 200 people living in Redondo, and the town had 2 restaurants, 2 churches, and a seawall with a waterfront walkway. That walkway that's still there today, or in a variation. I'm sure they've remodeled it and
I'm sure
updated it several times. A new pier was built with a sign on the end that read Redondo Beach, where woods meet water.
Oh, I like it.
Solid name.
Yeah.
Solid. Good branding.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. In the 1920s, 3 Christian campgrounds were built in Federal Way. Became a Christian campground destination, which apparently is a thing.
Yeah, I think it still is.
Is it?
There's a Christian campground where I grew up, near where I grew up.
Okay.
Glendon?
Glendon?
We never went there, but there was always like the lost children going into Glendon. I might be getting that name wrong.
Oh boy. That sounds fucking ominous. Lost children wandering into...
I was just like, who are those kids that going into that Bible camp?
Oh boy.
Yeah.
The 3 campgrounds were called Methodist Epworth Heights, Bethel Gospel Park, and Lutherland.
I remember the name Lutherland for some reason.
Yeah?
Yeah. What's that from? Is that from Federal Way?
It might be from Federal Way.
Oh my God. Okay.
I'd never heard it before researching this.
That rings a bell, and I don't know why.
Okay. There's a lot of Lutheran churches in Federal Way. So Lutherland, I assume, is a Lutheran church.
Most likely, yeah.
In 1920, the Wagon Wheel Restaurant opened. It was built on 356th and Pack Highway on what is now the site of the Brookdale Community Center. It was the main center for activity in town for years, and during Prohibition it served as a speakeasy. There was illegal gambling, and it was also Federal Way's main brothel.
Nice.
Yeah.
I would have never guessed Federal Way was cool enough for a brothel.
Well, when I was growing up, there was a brothel there.
Really?
Oh yeah, Crystal Spa. You know where Young's is, the head shop?
Yes.
Yeah, in that little strip mall, there's Young's and then there was Crystal Spa, and Crystal Spa was known to be
I guess there's always a brothel.
Yeah, I never went personally.
No,
but but I definitely heard all the rumblings, and I knew people who worked at Young's who mentioned that was
interesting
the place to go if you.
I never knew.
Yeah.
My own little town.
Yeah. But it's it's a massage parlor in a strip mall. It's all tucked away, and it's all like...
Those are legitimate massages happening in there.
Maybe. If you look through the front window, it's, completely like everything's covered up and opaque, and yeah. In 1929, the 5 school districts that operated Federal Way were consolidated into Federal Way School District 210. The vote was 214 for, 167 against. So there's about 400 people legally able to vote in Federal Way. The Federal Way School District became the namesake of the city of Federal Way.
Yes, it did.
They named it after the school district.
A couple graduates right here, good old District 210.
That's right, District 210. Oh boy. So it was named after Pack Highway. So Pack Highway was the federal highway. So they named the school district the Federal Way School District. And as a result of incorporating all the schools into one district, a large single school was built for all students K through 12 that opened in 1930 on the site of what is now Federal Way High School.
Yes.
So I always heard growing up that the school came first and they named the city after the school, but it was the district that came first, and they named both the city and the school after the district.
Yeah, I had no idea. That's complete news to me, and that's actually a good enough reason, I guess, to name it that.
Yeah.
They could have done something else.
Well, they probably were thinking... the school district can have a boring name like that. The Federal Way School. Yeah. If you grew up in Stone's Landing and then you found out that the name of your school district was the Federal Way School District, you'd be like, whatever. Okay, that doesn't matter. Okay, so what? Who cares? It was just a thing to name it.
Yeah.
But they probably did not anticipate that they would be naming the whole city after the school district, named after the highway.
It just took one person with imagination to go, you know what?
Yeah.
Let's not call it this.
What about Stone's Landing? What about Buena? What about anything?
I keep going back to Buena. It's like, that
Buena's a great name.
Cool.
Yeah. Or just name the whole town Redondo.
Why not?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess because there was already a California Redondo, and
there's a ton of those. Auburn was named after residents of Auburn, New York.
Yeah, fair enough.
Initially. It was originally called Slaughter.
Which is kind of cool, but
kind of cool.
You don't really want that as your town.
Yeah, during the Treaty Wars, right after all this, the treaties were signed with the natives surrendering their land, a Lieutenant Slaughter was killed in the Valley of Auburn. So after him, they named it Slaughter, and then they opened up the Slaughter Post Office and the Slaughter Inn, which was called the Slaughterhouse.
Okay.
And then they said, this is a bad idea.
You know what? People are going to come away from this place like not wanting to go back.
But it just goes to show you that people in South King County can change the names of cities.
But not, I guess they can't.
You have it in your power, Seattle City Council. Martin Moore, I'm talking to you. Guy I grew up with who's now on the Federal Way City Council. This should be your platform.
Absolutely.
So by 1930, there was virtually no more logging in Federal Way. All the massive 10 to 15 foot in diameter trees had been cleared, and all that were left were small trees, quote unquote, 150-year-old trees. The logging roads that were established then are now many of the main roads in Federal Way. Interstate 5 finished construction through Federal Way in the 1960s. The area had not been incorporated as a city, which meant it was under county jurisdiction and had little to no urban planning. Which is why it's so fucked up down there. Roads, schools, and services were overcrowded and stretched to the limit. In the 1960s, Federal Way was the fastest growing area in Washington.
Wow, that surprises me.
Yeah, because there was no limits. They could build, we're going to build, one person will buy a piece of land and say, okay, we're going to build these $500,000 houses. And then someone said, I'm going to build, $75 a month apartments on the other side of the street there. So they had no idea how to plan for schools, for utilities, for anything, because they didn't know what was coming in because it was unincorporated.
And that's kind of, you can still see that today.
Oh, yes.
Like how just completely disorganized the city is. And
yep.
Yeah. That's why.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
That is exactly why.
I mean, not cool, but cool.
But interesting. Yeah. In 1971, the residents voted against Federal Way becoming a city. And again, twice more in the 1980s.
I remember these votes.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. I was a little young for the ones in the 80s, but I remember my parents later telling me about not understanding why people would vote against it becoming a city.
We were a suburb of Seattle for all of my childhood. We still are a suburb. I mean, I say we like I still live there. I don't live there anymore.
Well, I remember the big, what pissed me off the most is when I was growing up, we all had 206 phone numbers.
Oh, yeah.
And then they changed everything, so they added 206, 425, and 363, and I don't, maybe one or two others, I don't remember all of them.
253, 360.
253, 360, that's the one, 360. But when we went from 206 to 253, and I was like, this is like the closest I had to identifying as living in Seattle, and you took that away from me.
Over.
Yeah, and then everybody would be like, yeah, 206, and talk about Seattle, being like, oh, I'm not that anymore.
Yeah, having to dial area codes is something I remember having to switch over to.
Yeah.
WA79855 was, I shouldn't say that out loud, was my best friend's phone number growing up.
Oh, okay.
It was told to me as WA.
WA7.
Yeah.
Interesting.
WA7, yeah.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, I think the only phone number that is currently operational that I still remember is my childhood friend's parents' phone number. Mm-hmm. My mom's phone number she got rid of a couple of years ago, so I don't have any phone numbers memorized.
I remember all those phone numbers growing up, all my best friends.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you can dial that one now and reach.
Maybe we should bleep that. I don't think that the pranksters listening to this,
Let's call that number.
Yeah, we'll get them. We'll call them up. I heard on a podcast your phone number. J.R. Jack Cisna was born in Bellingham, Washington in 1908. He went to the UW Law School and founded Federal Old Line Insurance, which became an incredibly successful life insurance company in Seattle. He purchased 20 acres of land on the southwest corner of 312th and Pack Highway, and opened what would become known as Federal Shopping Way.
Okay, I'm trying to picture that in my mind now.
312th and Pack Highway?
I know where that is, but what's there now? Albertsons?
Now, there's the Albertsons this was on the southwest corner, so it was across 312th from where the Albertsons is today. I think the last time I was driving down through there, it was a big Korean mart.
Oh, right.
It's where the Barnes & Noble was. There was oh my god, I'm just going through my mind of all
Growing up, it was a Payless, and there was a skating rink there.
Yeah. So Federal Shopping Way opened in 1954 and featured a string of stores. They held a promotional contest, gave away ponies, and published a weekly newspaper called the Federal Way Review.
They gave away ponies?
As prizes.
What?
Yeah. As like this is our grand opening. We're going to give away a pony.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Pretty great.
Come back with a pony. So suddenly own a pony.
Cram it into the garage, your closet. I don't know. More rural, I guess, at that point.
I guess
having a pony would be more. In 1962, Santa Fair was built. The large amusement park right in the heart of Federal Way. It had 75 carnival rides, a roller skating rink, a bowling alley, 2 theaters, and a hippodrome. It's a big arena.
What year was this?
This was 1962, same year as the World's Fair.
That was gone by the time I have memories too.
Well, apparently the skating rink was still there.
It was still there.
You were there.
That's the same place.
It was the same. It was the same area, but it was a big carnival amusement park area. Cisna also bought double-decker buses from England to shepherd people around the fairgrounds and shopping center. So this is massive. It was the whole kind of block between 312th and I think it went all the way to 320th.
Yeah.
And it's all a big amusement park, shopping complex.
I think the remnants of that were still there when I was growing up. The buildings were still there, and it's all gone now.
It might have been there when I was very young, but I don't remember it. Yeah, I don't remember it. Cisna brought in historical buildings from around the area and built what he called Historic Park on the corners of the grounds, including a cabin from 1883 that was moved from just a few blocks away. Old World Square was added to the grounds in 1964, which replicated a European town square and had a replica of Shakespeare's study.
I did not remember that.
Yeah, sounds kind of cool, though.
That is kind of cool.
It's weird that it's in Federal Way.
Why didn't we keep the cool things?
Oh, because we didn't have zoning laws. This is what happens when you don't have zoning laws, people. By 1967, Federal Shopping Way was bankrupt and quickly fell apart through a series of lawsuits over the next 15 years. So it lasted 5 years before it went out of business.
That's too bad.
Yeah. In 1975, development started on a swampy, marshy area on what is now the southeast corner of Pack Highway and 320th Street. The land was originally claimed as a homestead in 1879 by Taylor and Jane Webb. Their daughter, Mabel Webb Alexander, lived on the property until she died at age 96.
Nice.
Been there till 96 years.
Man.
She lived on that. August 14th, 1975, the SeaTac Mall opened.
Yep.
Where I spent most of my time.
It was the place to be.
Oh my God, yes.
Probably still is.
Oh, well, not really. Have you been down there recently?
My folks still live down there, so I don't venture much into the actual Federal Way proper.
I guess the wall has been remodeled in the last couple of years, but for a while it was not looking good.
Yeah. Well, malls are just dying in general, and that's no exception.
SeaTac Mall featured 42 stores. 20,000 people visited the mall during the first weekend, and within a year the mall had grown to 90 stores and 4 department stores. For the first several years of its existence, the mall used a Thunderbird for a logo and had a mascot, Thaddeus T. Thunderbird.
I remember the Thunderbird. I remember Thaddeus T. Thunderbird, though.
I don't remember Thaddeus T. Thunderbird as well, but I do remember how they're seeing Thunderbirds all over the place.
Absolutely.
Yeah, in December 4th, 1985, this is the crowning cultural achievement of Federal Way. This is by far the biggest thing ever to come out of Federal Way.
And this is in 1985.
1985.
See if I can think about what this is.
Yeah, see if you can guess.
85, I'm a sophomore in high school.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
What happened? I don't remember.
Okay. A new restaurant opened in the SeaTac Mall food court. And it sold cinnamon buns.
Oh, right. Cinnabon.
Cinnabon! Yes. SeaTac Mall is able to proudly boast that it is the home of the very first ever Cinnabon.
I'm glad I don't remember that date. If I was able to go like, that was Cinnabon! And you're like, all right, that says something about
December 14th, 1985. That's on my calendar.
That's right. I remember it like it was yesterday.
Yeah, the first ever Cinnabon opened in the SeaTac Mall in Federal Way.
But they are amazing.
They are amazing.
To be fair, that was probably, at that time, the best cinnamon roll I ever had.
Yeah, I think it's still the best cinnamon roll I've ever had.
It's one of those things I can't let myself eat, so I don't know anymore.
You know, it's funny. I did the research for this a couple of weeks ago, but I went to Mohi yesterday, Museum of History and History, and they have a big thing on food history, and there's a giant thing about Cinnabon and how Cinnabon came from the Northwest.
Now, was Federal Way the first place to get a Cinnabon?
Federal Way was the first ever Cinnabon.
It was the first ever Cinnabon.
The first ever Cinnabon was in Federal Way in the SeaTac Mall.
And that's our claim to fame.
That's our claim to fame. So take that, Auburn.
That's right.
Yeah.
That says a lot about what you can expect to see in Federal Way.
Yeah, it was the one right in the food court when you walk right in the corner. It's got the white tile and everything. Yeah, that's the first ever Cinnabon.
Is it still there?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't know.
I doubt it. Yeah. Byron Betts, the son of Charles Betts, the man who turned Redondo into a vacation destination for a time, was born in 1926 and lived most of his life in Redondo. So he's the son of the guy that built a big amusement park in Redondo. In the mid-70s, he purchased 12 acres of land on the outskirts of town and built a half-dozen carnival-style rides on the property, and he named it Enchanted Village. And Enchanted Village opened in 1977.
I recognized that name, and now I know why.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? The guy that, around the turn of the century, the son of the guy that built this big complex ended up building Enchanted Village. And in 1984, the park expanded and built a water park next door called Wild Waves. And together now they are known as Enchanted Parks.
True story, my dad's construction company built Wild Waves.
No shit!
No shit.
Really? Yeah. Interesting.
They were the framing part of it, and at age 15 or 16 when it opened, I had a summer season pass, which was the perfect age.
Oh, are you kidding me?
We were hog heaven, because that was the place to be, absolutely.
Oh, man.
It was amazing.
I remember, that's really cool. I remember that was kind of a marker of class distinction, where when you got out of school, kids would be like, "Oh, see you at Wild Waves. Be at Wild Waves all summer. Season pass at Wild Waves." But if your dad was the owner, that's
still loves
awesome.
Wild Waves. No, we didn't own it.
You're right, yeah. But if they helped build and helped construct it.
And another true story, my first paid acting gig was Enchanted Village.
Really?
I did the little animal costumes, and we did a little improv around the park.
Seriously?
Walk around and play freeze tag and little endowment scenes and things. Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
And I was 18 years old, my very first paid acting gig.
Wow.
$3.37 an hour.
Sweet. Yeah. Oh, baller.
I think it was a few cents more than everybody else got.
Hey,
we're actors.
That's right. Yeah, that's you were not undignified.
That's right.
You might be wearing a squirrel costume and and playing Zip Zap Zop. But
Yeah, it was definitely high class.
Yeah. Betts died in 2003, but the parks are still there. They changed hands several times and for a while belonged to Six Flags.
I thought they still did.
They don't. Oh. They sold it recently.
Okay.
It is currently 70 acres and owned by Orlando-based CNL Income Properties.
So much has changed.
Just some out of town. Yeah, the Wild Wave sold it a few years back. Six Flags sold it a few years back, but they built a bunch of stuff and made a bunch of improvements.
Yeah, Wild
and changes.
Waves became less of a water park and more like a big ride park. Like there's a lot of things. I mean, it's still a water park, but there's rides there that just did not exist when I was a kid.
Yeah, well, I remember when I was young. I remember it was kind of like a second-rate amusement park with a couple of roller coasters, and then it became the water park that happened to have to this side, and now it's like this is this big roller coaster park that has. It's just getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah,
it's going to expand out to Milton before you know it.
There's still room for that place to grow out there.
There's a lot of property back there. Also, right off to the side there, the creepiest rest stop I have ever seen in my life. I was driving back up from LA a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, "Oh no, I can't wait until I get back to Seattle. I'll just pull off." I've been driving for 2 days straight, and every single spot was taken. But there was no one there. Every single spot on the rest stop was occupied, but there was not a single person inside. It was the creepiest thing.
That is so creepy.
It was so creepy. It was like 2:00 in the morning,
That's
coming
the abduction
back.
rest stop.
Seriously, yeah.
Abduction rest stop.
It's like, I am a grown, physically fit man, but am I about to be kidnapped here? Yeah, not a good place to stop.
Well, my parents live so close to there that I would never have any reason to stop at that rest stop.
Right,
so
yeah.
I don't think I've ever stopped at that rest stop.
I had not either, because I grew up in Federal Way and now live in Seattle, and but it's just like, no, I've had too much coffee.
Yeah.
And now I'll get murdered. Great.
That's really weird. Where are those people?
I don't know. I don't know. It's the weirdest thing.
It'd just be stolen cars, too.
Yeah,
which also something about Federal Way.
Yeah, a lot of stolen cars. Having faced opposition on becoming incorporated as a city, a new plan was put in place to redraw the proposed city limits and only allow the neighborhoods that wish to become a city to be a part of the new city of Federal Way. The vote was approved on March 14th, 1989, and Federal Way became a city February 28th, 1990.
By that time, I was gone.
Yeah. As well you should have been. Yeah. So it seems like it's because all the people with money were in Redondo and they didn't want to have to pay for all the people that lived in regular old Federal Way. Yeah. They didn't want their taxes to subsidize their schools and
there was definitely like growing up there was the rich part of town, and that was like anything like west of First Avenue south. Like if you lived down in that area, you had more money than the rest of us.
That's very true. Yeah. Yep. The new boundaries excluded the Redondo neighborhood, and Redondo is now considered a neighborhood in Des Moines.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's not a part of Federal Way at all.
They're smart.
Ugh. In 1995, the Super Mall opened in Auburn, and the Super Mall diverted shoppers away from SeaTac Mall. Decline in attendance, increased vacancy in stores, and a series of gang-related violent incidents caused the name of the mall to be changed to the Commons. So for a good 10-year chunk there, I would say half of the stores in SeaTac were abandoned. Were vacant, and then all the buildings across 320th were all abandoned, and it was just a bad part of town.
Those were dark days of Federal Way that I did not lay witness to.
So, that was when I was in high school. Yeah, it was the late 90s, and it was all just abandoned buildings. The AMC North, that movie theater, was abandoned for years.
Is that still there?
No.
Because there's the ones when the mall opened, there was like AMC theaters. There were 6 theaters. Really tiny screens. Yeah. But it's where I saw every movie.
Me too.
Every movie. And the one across the street, AMC North, opened up just in time for episode 6 of Star Wars. No, sorry, episode 6. Yeah, Return of the Jedi.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was the first movie I saw at the new place.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, then Gateway opened.
Yeah,
by there, and Gateway is a second-run theater now. I remember I worked at Laser Quest, the laser tag arena.
Oh,
I worked there for years, and I worked there when the Phantom Menace came out, and we all went and got the midnight show and hung out, and it was really great. And we saw that at Gateway. Nice. But now the theaters that are in the Commons now are awesome. They're the ones with the big recliners, and like you get the seats.
I still have not been, but those are great.
Yeah.
AMC is kind of rebranding themselves a little bit. They've got those in Factoria, too.
Oh, do it?
The reclining seat theaters. Yeah.
Oh man, it's the best.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You don't fall asleep.
No, you don't. You're comfortable. Your back doesn't hurt. Yeah. Today, more than 93,000 people live in Federal Way. It is the 9th largest city in Washington State and the 5th largest in King County. The oldest structure in Federal Way, the Barker Cabin, built by homesteader John Barker in 1881, has been renovated and still stands at 348th Street by the Aquatic Center. I have driven by it several times, but I have never visited.
Neither have I. I didn't know it was there.
Yeah, it's if you're driving down, you know where the Aquatic Center is, or by
Yes.
Winco
It
Foods.
was built for the Goodwill Games.
It was!
Yeah.
I remember going to the Goodwill Games.
1990? No, that was like 88, right?
I think it was 90.
Was it 90?
Yeah. I remember going when I was a kid. Maybe it was 92 even.
Oh,
but I remember wondering what this was, and the only answer I got was it's like the Olympics, but not as good.
I don't think they have them anymore.
The Goodwill Games?
Yeah.
That would not surprise me at all.
I haven't heard about them since probably those Goodwill Games.
I remember going to the diving championship, and people got medals afterwards, and nobody seemed to care.
Well, if you're a swimmer, apparently that Federal Way Aquatic Center is like the place to go. It's like got the best, maybe the longest swimming lanes, or there's something about the diving there that's really great. So
They have the giant, 30, 40 foot tall diving
that's it.
platforms.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is pretty cool. So way to go, Federal Way.
Way to
You got
go,
something.
Federal Way. Yeah. Cinnabon and high diving
Cinnabon and high
platform.
diving. Yeah.
Yeah. And who knows where the future of Federal Way is going?
Hopefully a name change.
Hopefully a name change.
Although
Yeah.
that's, they're so costly. They've already got all the signage.
Yeah. Well, remember a couple of years ago when King County changed its namesake to Martin Luther King?
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't change the name, so everything could still say King County, but they changed it so now it's named after Martin Luther King instead of Vice President King.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so that's why you see all the signs and stuff for King County and has the silhouette of Martin Luther King, because now it's named after Martin Luther King, even though it's been around for...
I assumed it always was.
No, it was after Buchanan's Vice President King, who was kind of a douche. So they
I guess we
changed
did
the
something
name.
right.
Yeah, exactly. So if somebody out there named Federal Way wants to do something great,
You got my vote.
yeah, right. Even though not legally allowed to vote in Federal Way anymore.
Cool.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Greg.
I learned something about my little hometown.
Excellent. Now, thank you for listening to the Seattle Files. Again, my name is Chris. We'll be back next Tuesday with a new topic and a new episode. If you have a topic suggestion you would like to hear an episode about, shoot me an email at theseattlefiles@gmail.com. Like us on Facebook, subscribe and rate in iTunes. If you want to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/theseattlefiles. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week. 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 Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week.